we set about reminding our own selves about the power we had to run our own affairs. You just have to do it. You just have to take leadership.
Hello, I'm Reeta Roy, and today I'm honored to host an inspiring leader whose groundbreaking career has transformed the landscape of Indigenous rights, justice, and education in Canada and beyond. She's the first First Nations woman to earn a law degree in Canada. She has spent decades advocating for Indigenous people, creating meaningful pathways for reconciliation. And she has inspired a whole new generation to follow in her footsteps. From her early days, growing up on 6 nations of the Grand River Territory, to breaking barriers as the first First Nations woman in Canada to earn a law degree. From serving as the first female Ombudsman of Ontario, to leading as the first female chief of the 6 nations of the Grand River. From groundbreaking initiatives that inspire and significantly impacting Indigenous education, to advancing gender equality with the Prosperity Project. She's also been recognized with the Indigenous Women in Leadership Award. I am thrilled to welcome a trailblazer, a visionary, and a tireless advocate for equality, Roberta Jamieson. Roberta, welcome, and thank you for being part of this podcast, Transcending Boundaries.
Who could say no to you, Reeta?
I don't know about that, but I'm so happy. I'm so happy that you're here. This is just a conversation about learning to get to know you and all the events, the people, the worldviews that shaped the leader that you've become. And we have an audience which is keen to listen, especially young people, to get to know you. So I always think a fun thing to start is to start back at childhood. Now, I understand, having done a little bit of research on you, that you grew up in a very tight-knit family. Your dad ran something called Bobby's Grill, and it was a hangout place for elders who listened to, I guess, cool music, but they must have also been debating politics. And that was sort of the ambiance growing up. Would you tell us more about that childhood and what it was like?
Well, yes. I mean, I grew up at 6 nations of the Grand River, which is the most populous First Nations community in Canada.
Wow.
So I'm a Mohawk. My father is a Mohawk. But together in the community were Mohawk, Cayuga, Oneida, Onondaga, Seneca, and Tuscarora peoples all living together. Quite unusual. So the restaurant, Bobby's Grill, named after my father, was kind of a hub in the community of Ohsweken, or Ohsweken, as our people pronounce it, meeting of 4 paths. And my mother had been nursing, and then she left nursing to also work in the restaurant. I'm one of 8 children. I'm number 3, which maybe accounts for my interest in mediation later in life. And because if you're not a mediator and 3rd in 8, you don't survive. So Bobby's Grill, and yes, that place, our school that I went to on reserve, I did not attend residential school, though members of our family did, was just up the road. And so at lunchtime, I had to come back and wait tables.
All right, so put you to work.
And they put me to work. And so one of the things that really struck me, waiting tables on council day. You have to remember, Reeta, I grew up at a time when we had an Indian agent, what we called an Indian agent. Our people were known as Indians in those times under the Indian Act then and survives today. But we had an Indian agent who made the decisions, approved decisions in our community. And I would wait on council day. In would come our councillors elected locally from the community, all First Nations people, and the non-First Nations Indian agent who smoked a very big cigar and really lorded over them. It was obvious to me. And I was so impacted by that I thought, I need to do something to change this. This is not right. We are the founders of democracy in the Western world. The Haudenosaunee peoples, we are, it's been recorded in history. And here we are sitting subject to someone else making decisions for us. People came into our community to be the doctors, to take on all these positions of authority when we had traditional healers, when we had our own systems of governance. And I was, even as a kid, grade 7, grade 8, I thought, this is not acceptable. Whatever I do, I'm going to figure out a way to change this.
Amazing. What were the conversations like at home about what you all were experiencing?
Oh, what you'd expect. Sports, right? Music. My father was a jazz musician. He actually has the distinction of being the first North American native to write and record a jazz song.
Wow.
In the 30s, called Anytime, Anyplace, Anywhere. He was in the Special Services in the U.S. Armed Forces. He was a visionary. He always had a dream. Not all, they didn't all work out, but he really set his sights on different ideas that were out of the norm. My mother was a nurse by training, non-native.
Second generation Irish.
Yes, Irish, English. Came to the community to nurse in our local, we had a hospital in those days. Fell in love with my father, married him, excommunicated from her family as a result. This was not a popular thing to do in those days. And so as a result, growing up, I didn't learn a lot about my mother's family. It was many years later, actually, when I got married, when they all came. And my mother said, invite, she was one of many as well, invite all of them. And I said, why? They're not going to come. They did.
They did.
So things repaired later, but growing up, I didn't know. She was a hard worker. She was determined. She was, had unconditional love for her children, had respect for our community, and lived to the age of 93 at Six Nations. My father died at 48. Then not only had she married a Mohawk, she then married a Seneca and had 2 more kids.
Wow.
So she was committed to the community. But there's so much I can tell you about growing up, but that's just a little taste.
Oh, but it sounds like 2 remarkable parents.
They were.
And exceptionally independent-minded and very clear about how they wanted to lead their lives.
And very committed to our community.
Yes.
Very strongly committed to the community, which was important. That's one of our values, is we have a responsibility to the collective, to the well-being of the collective. And I grew up with high expectations, which were unspoken.
Unspoken.
Unspoken. They didn't have to be spoken. They were, you see, our people believe that the Creator gives each of us something we call instructions. And some people call them a toolkit. So in there you have, what are you? Are you a good communicator? Are you a leader? Are you funny? Can you dance? Can you paint? What can you do? And your job is to figure out what those instructions are. And then you have to honor them. But you honor them for not only to be true to yourself, but for your family, your community, and society at large. That's your job. That's an obligation. That's not an option for us. And so that has stuck with me my whole life. So high expectations for sure.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into that toolkit, to your set of instructions then. So how did you set off to actually begin to figure out who you were? You had the sense of purpose, an expectation to honor and to protect and to support your community. But was education the pathway?
In part, education was racist in those days, right?
Yeah.
We didn't see ourselves in the textbooks. And I went to school on reserve from up until grade 8. And then we were bused off reserve to 7 different high schools.
7.
Quite deliberate, in my opinion, to split us up and integrate us. And so the racism was quite palpable at the high school level on both sides. And I was fortunate when I was in early grades to have a teacher by the name of Jamieson, no relation. And she told us, this is what now I have to tell you. Now, let me tell you the truth. And so, Columbus discovered America. Well, no. That's not what happened. But she stayed true to what the curriculum that, in those days, the Department of Indian Affairs required. But she also said, this is the truth. So critical thinking. I learned critical thinking in those, and I learned more about the richness of our own history as well. And so I think your identity is formed by learning about who your people are, and then dealing with challenges to that. I didn't look like the stereotypical Mohawk. So, I was challenged for that. So when your identity is challenged, you strengthen your identity.
Yes.
And so I was 17 when I went off to McGill. Just a kid, whatever possessed me. My sister drove me down there and dropped me off and drove away.
And left you dropping lot.
There I was. But in those days, I wanted to be a doctor, so I set out.
So tell us about your early years at McGill, making friends, encountering people from probably all over Canada, perhaps all over the world.
Oh, all over the world.
All over the world, yeah.
Yeah, I was placed by a Department of Indian Affairs bureaucrat in a residence for women, and we used to call it the Virgin Palace.
Oh, okay, let's not go down there too far there, okay.
Yeah. Very strict place. So you couldn't do anything. You couldn't. I lasted there about not quite 3 months.
What do you mean? What happened?
I met 3 other Native students.
Okay.
All Ojibwe from Manitoulin Island. And the 3 of us decided, if we're going to stick together, if we're going to survive this, we need to stick together. I did meet people from all over. I also met young women my first day in residence who came and looked through my closet and through my drawers and to see, I guess, who I was, what I had, and talk about violated. I thought, this is not the place for me. And so the four of us got together and moved out and rented 2 apartments.
That's amazing.
And so for the first 2 years, I was there downtown. The third year, I had had enough of downtown Montreal, and I moved out to Ganawage, a Mohawk community, because I wanted to be with my own people. And then I commuted in. So those years were, well, I also got involved. I was there 1 month when the FLQ crisis happened. Tanks were rolling down the streets. I was like, where am I? Laporte kidnapping. It was a crazy time in Montreal. Tanks called out against our own people.
Yeah.
The only other time was Oka a few years later, some years later. So it was quite a challenging time on many levels. The premier at the time, Bourassa, had a brilliant idea for hydroelectric power. Decided they were going to build the dam in James Bay and flood out the Cree people who make their home along the James Bay. And so cavalier that this is what we could do, could be done. So a lot of students then, we got together and thought, what could we do? So I became a protester then. And in the
I think you're starting to listen to your instructions. Yeah, it's starting to come to your instructions.
In the evening news, my family back home saw me marching down the street of Montreal with a sign that said Bourassa, strategically placed.
Yes.
And I learned, though, it was the first time elders, I believe, in Canada gave evidence in a court case. And a decision came down that required the government to stop and look again and involve the Cree people in shaping the future and in dealing with their rights. And I thought, our people need those skills. If this is how we're going to create change, take our place, better have some legal skills. So I applied to law school.
So you switched to law. And what was the experience like in law school? Did you meet interesting people there who also held similar beliefs about justice?
Justice, yes. I mean, I met people who I are really associated with, people maybe from the Maritimes, people who felt a bit marginalized, like myself. We were not very many women. It was a pretty homogeneous group. And there I was obliged to learn, the Queen owned all the land. Parliament was supreme. Of course, any Mohawk knows that's not true. So I had to figure out, how was I going to hold my nose and get through that? And I went home every weekend. I was in London, University of Western Ontario. It's about an hour and a bit from my house. If I hadn't been able to go home every weekend, I would not have survived it, because it was such a, talk about culture shock.
But deeply conflictual.
Yeah, and I would talk about treaties and rights, and the people would say, now remember, Reeta, this is before Canada had its own constitution that recognized at long last our rights. So this is before all that happened. So what I was talking about was just didn't land with the rest of the people in law school.
And yet you finished.
Well, I was determined.
Yeah, you finished, and you're the first First Nations woman to graduate from law school. How did the community receive this?
Well, I think they thought it was important that we had these skills. But, trust me, I am no Einstein. It's not because I'm brilliant that this happened. In Canada, for many years, if you wanted to get a post-secondary degree, you had to sign away your rights.
What do you mean, sign away your rights?
I mean, sign on the dotted line that I am no longer an Indian, a status Indian. And you received a sum of money, like, I don't know, one of my cousins did it before she married a non-native fellow, which was going to lose her status anyway. It was like $100 or something. But you had to give that up. So surprised that it took that long. So when I say, this is a major achievement, I say it's a sign of how long it took Canada to really accept and allow our people to obtain post-secondary degrees. Now I'm proud to say we are in the thousands of Indigenous lawyers in the country, and we are judges, and now we are on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So look what is possible.
Indeed. So you go on from that moment, that encounter, and you find yourself at some point in time as the first female ombudsman in Ontario. And I imagine you saw a lot into people's lives, into great difficulties, perhaps things women have faced. But what was that like in terms of having to preside over a set of facts when you knew at the end of those facts their lives and people and families?
What a privilege it was to take that role on. I was quite young when I took it on, and I felt there are so many people out there who are impacted by government decisions. That's the role of the Ombudsman, to look at complaints from people who feel they've been, treated unfairly. And I could identify with that. And I knew there were many people beyond our own communities who had suffered. Women, racialized groups, poor, inmates, so many. We had 10,000 complaints a year.
Wow.
And I thought I might bring some insight to that. The first thing I did was make sure that we were accessible to everybody, not just the people who could find their way to downtown Toronto, which is where we were. So I had offices, and people sometimes worked out of their cars all over the province. So accessibility with a capital A, I used to say to staff, drove them wild, was a priority for me. And creating positive change.
Yes.
To bring a just resolution. So I did that for 10 years. I was also very active around the world in that role, because I could see other countries. Nelson Mandela had just been elected.
Yes.
Maybe he was there 20 months when I was asked to go to Pretoria, Joburg, and then Pretoria. They were creating the public protector. Selby Bakwa was the first. And so I was there sharing what we knew about this business, this office. And I also went to Uganda. I went to Hong Kong, Taiwan, South America, Argentina, different places that were re-emerging in many areas, re-emerging democracies, reclaiming their own institutional control.
Yes.
And of course, that was music to my ears. So that was a fascinating time.
You mentioned a moment about being accessible and ensuring that the office, the ear of the Ombudsman was present. This is all in the pursuit of seeking justice. But what does it take to have justice? What does it take to have justice? Does it mean that one side wins and the other loses?
I've never been a practicing lawyer. I've never aspired to it, be in the courtroom and so on, even though I was heavily influenced early on by that court case.
Yes.
I don't think there's value in, or as much value, sometimes that's what you need, winner and loser being declared. Lately, our people in Canada have made great strides in the court system, which has pushed the policy system and governments to come to the table, and corporations. But I thought, if we're going to build lasting solutions, you need to resolve conflicts in the interest of everyone.
Yes.
And so the job, as I saw it then, and I was a mediator for a number of years as well, but I saw the job of ombudsman as a conflict resolver. If someone's complaining about maybe they're not getting their family support payments, or the Human Rights Commission did not investigate their complaint properly and they were treated badly by government, or I'm an inmate in a provincial facility and I'm not allowed access to religious practices, how can you find a solution that will satisfy that complaint but improve the process overall and prevent things from happening in the future that are unfair? That's, I think, that approach produces lasting solutions. Winner and loser, you still have to go back to the table and figure out how we're going to live together.
Yes.
But I found that position to be quite a unique one and a privileged one, really.
How do you prepare people to come forward, come to engage, and come to find ways that there can be lasting solution and a sense of justice and a sense that wrongs have been put right?
They have to believe. They have to believe in the institution. They have to believe in the process. We dealt with victims of torture from other countries.
Yes.
Who came to Canada. And I found you couldn't just say, oh, well, here, we're open for business. Come on over here. They said, complain against the government? What? That's what I'm fleeing from in my home country. And so we knew that we had to create a special approach to dealing with people in that circumstance, just as we had to create special approaches for my own people, maybe living in remote communities, fly-in only. And role models are essential in that. Showing cases where success was achieved is essential. Demonstrating the outcome, going to the people, being there physically, meeting with people. They sound simple. They're vital. They're profound. They're important.
Yeah. Yeah, so profound in terms of not only building that kind of credibility, but also trust.
And you better deliver, because trust
goes so far.
And trust is really hard to build, but it can be lost in a nanosecond. I know that, again, from our own people's dealings over the years. You trust, and
you don't.
you don't. And so then it starts again.
Yeah. Now, speaking about trust and the trust of your people, here you are, I think the first woman to be elected chief of the Six Nations of the Grand River. What was that process, and how were you called into that title?
Oh dear, that's a long story.
That's okay. We've got time. I want to hear it.
It's a long story. Well, I had been the ombudsman. I had finished my term. I was mediator. And I was, as always, living at Six Nations. And our people had, we have two systems that coexist at Six Nations: the traditional form of government and the elected form of government under the Indian Act.
What is the traditional form of government?
It's the Confederacy.
Okay.
It's the 52 chiefs. It's the age-old traditional form. It is not hereditary. People think you're born into this, like, royalty. No, it has its own system, which has beautiful practices of consensus building. Women have a voice. Women are the conscience. Women select the chiefs. Children have a voice. So these ideas that we're coming up with globally about children's rights and women's right, these white people have had this forever.
It's existed for centuries.
So the elected system runs all of the services in the community, deals with the external community as well, and they coexist, sometimes with a lot of tension, sometimes not. Because the Indian Act system was something imposed on our people from outside. So I told you it's a long story.
Keep going. You're doing just fine.
In about 2001, we had a mess in our community. There was a fundamental lack of accountability. And with the complaints were about the elected system not doing a good job. Money was being mismanaged. A forensic audit was required. It was not a good picture. They were falling prey to external people who were exploiting the lack of capacity and expertise. And so there was a group came to me and said, okay, you're a lawyer, you've been the ombudsman, now you have to run for chief. I said, I don't want to be chief. I don't want to run. And in our community, culturally, when you're asked to take leadership, you're expected to decline the first time. So this was not a big surprise. The second time they came, I said, no, really, I don't want to do this. And then the third time they came, and when you're asked the third time to do something, you have to say yes. And my own family went from saying, are you out of your mind? To saying, you have to do this. And so I did. I said, okay, read my lips, one term to put things right, get back to proper accountability. But I'll only run if you give me a mandate and of change. So they turned over 9 of 12 counselors and the chief. And I said, okay, we've got our mandate. And away we went. We had to do a forensic audit. We had to really reorganize a lot of things. Really restore accountability. Accountability to the people, not to the government who might be funding you, not to this department or that minister or this business leader externally who's trying to exploit us, but to your own people. That's the job. And so I talked earlier about the Indian agent. In our council chambers, the Indian agent used to sit on a platform above everybody. And down below sat the council facing the Indian agent, waiting for kind of, a word from on high. And at the back sat the people. So one of the first things I did was I said, we're getting rid of that platform. And they said, but it's made of cement. How are we going to do that? I said, I don't know. Get a jackhammer, whatever you got to do, get rid of that. So we did. We leveled that. We said, we are going to sit on the level with our council and turn that councilors around, and we're going to face the people. And it was a small room, so in order to have enough people get in there, we had to create steps so that they sat above us. And I said that the kind of the mental, psychological shift that creates in people, you know who you're answering.
Oh, absolutely. When you think about reform, governance, that's quite a visual in terms of that. What were the other tough conversations you had to have or that you encountered when you took on this role? Because clearly this was all about change, a fresh mandate.
Oh, dear. Well, there were people who were very upset with the change. There were, it wasn't nice. There were people who really took a toll on my personal family. There were, because I upset some apple carts. There were people who were doing well under the old system, which was rife with, who knows where the checks went and so on. And they didn't like the fact that all of a sudden there were systems and rules and procedures and so on. So locally it was tough for a time, but that also shows you, I think it's about living with the legacy of colonialism too, is we were committed to this as a council, nurturing a system of empowerment. We are not at the mercy of somebody else. I can tell you one of the things, and government often was not very happy either. I remember they sent me this agreement and contribution agreement for health services. And we had 170 people working for health departments. And so you have to sign this annual contribution agreement. And they put it in front of me, and of course, lawyer in me, I read it. I read every page. And they wanted us to give up our intellectual properties.
Wow.
Our rights to our system of nutrition. We had developed different things in the community. And they said I was giving up our intellectual. I said, I'm not signing this. I'm sorry. Our intellectual property of today is our land of yesterday. So think about that, right? I'm not doing this. And there was a huge uproar amongst a lot of my people, even some of my counselors, who said, but you have to. We won't get paid. We won't, how are we going to function? I said, we're going to function.
Oh, we're not giving this up.
And so they said, no, we have to sign it. I said, okay, I'll sign it. I'll X out this. I'll initial it. We'll send it back to Ottawa. So then it came back. Of course, it back and forth, back. Long story short, they said, fine, you don't have to. Because I said, I'm not. In what universe would we give up our intellectual property to our own ways of knowing, our knowledge about how to feed our people, how to look after our people, how to care for our own? Why would universe is that fair? Does that make sense? And so, but the sense of reason I'm telling you the story is we set about reminding our own selves about the power we had to run our own affairs. You just have to do it. You just have to take leadership. You just have to have the courage to do the best thing for your people. And guess what? It'll be the best thing for others around you as well. And I've spent most of the latter part of my life working on changing things. I've always felt that to be more just for our people will benefit Canadians.
Yes.
I mean, we know that education is a huge challenge.
Absolutely.
And if we were to close that gap, which is still too large, guess what? Canada would get
much better off.
$265 billion GDP.
Absolutely.
Contributions. So it's not about rights, justice. It's all about self-interest as well. It's in all of our interests.
Yes.
And that's back to mediation. Creating solutions, shaping a future where we all benefit. That's what I've spent my life doing, I think. I think everybody has a role to play. And so I spent a lot of time meeting with CEOs right across the country, government ministers, and so on, to engage all of us in this initiative to invest in the future of Canada by investing in Canada's fastest growing demographic group, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis youth. And that was I did that. I can't believe I did that. I must be really old now, Alvita. I did that for 16 years.
Oh, you did a tremendous job. What was the reception when you started to speak in terms of we're investing in the future of the country?
Well, I think a lot of minds got changed.
Yes.
Because I've found over my life that people are more inclined to do things when they see it will be in their interest to do them. And I knew that this would be in their interest. And so it's about articulating that.
Yeah.
It's about talking directly to understanding what is it that you, and again, a good mediator understands the positions that are coming to the table. And what is it that you're after? Well, we're all after a country where people have well-being. Education is primary. But what many people in Canada didn't and don't know is our young people are not graduating. 9 out of 10 Canadian kids can graduate from high school. The numbers are as low as 4 out of 10 in many of our communities. How are we going to change the picture? What's it going to mean for the country? If we flip that around, just think the prosperity that would come from our communities who still don't have water they can drink, who still live in housing conditions that I often say if somebody landed from Mars and looked around here in Canada and looked at the state of the Indigenous communities, would they believe there was a commitment to sustainability in those communities? No, they would not.
No.
Because the infrastructure is lacking, and basic things like housing, water, and so on, education, healthcare, all of those things remain a challenge for our communities. But the key to changing that is not some benevolence.
Yes.
It is our own people. It is the young people who need space, support, role models, mentoring, teachers, educators. As you know, I'm very big on having our own people at the front of the classroom. And knowing if you have one educator who's Indigenous at the front of your classroom, you can see what you can be, but they also influence class of 30, 40 families are influenced. The change, the opportunity, the potential is just incredible.
Yes. Now, there's clearly a multiplier effect that's exponential in terms of change and the human condition, dignity of people, sense of justice.
But they have
and
to be
equality.
teaching things that
Yes,
relate.
absolutely.
I mean, the days of, the days of the curriculum that I learned about should be long gone. And now I'm really hoping, pushing that we will support more integration of Indigenous ways of knowing. I mean, not only I think it's an obvious thing in things like geography and history, but it should be obvious in science. It should be obvious in math. It should be,
It should be obvious everywhere in healthcare and how we heal the planet and address issues of climate change, manage our lands.
absolutely.
It should be in everything.
This is, and I'm delighted to see what's happening after the Truth and Reconciliation report that laid out a roadmap for change to bring reconciliation to the relationship between Indigenous peoples and other Canadians, that people have picked up those calls to action and are starting to implement them and create meaningful opportunities, underline meaningful, for our people
Yes.
to take our place in shaping the country's future, whether it's in developing resources, which many of our communities are playing leadership roles in this areas. Others are not. They've decided for themselves they want another path. That's okay. That's what shaping your own future is about. But talk about the expertise that can be brought to the table. And I'm thrilled that a lot of corporations are seeing that, are developing reconciliation action plans.
The path to reconciliation, though, starts, I think, with individuals really understanding and situating themselves either in a location or in history, at a moment in history, and understanding what their instructions are. Can you just share a bit more about what else we, as leaders today, what else other people listening can do to bring us closer into reconciliation? And I think this message applies not just about what's happening in Canada, but in many parts of the world where there has been pain, there has been injustice, there have been wrongs, and yet they too want to believe that there are people with a future. And reconciliation has to be at the heart of moving forward together. What does it take to do that?
That is so true. And the words, the head commissioner for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission said, there's 4 A's. Awareness. So people need to know what our shared history is. The good, the bad, and the ugly. We share a history. But we don't want to get stuck there, because we don't want people to feel guilt and paralysis and can't move forward. We want them to move on to acknowledgement of that history. We then want them to take responsibility, and the 3rd A is apology. The 4th A is action. And so moving through those A's is a very important process. So I've talked about what some of the companies are doing, but as an individual, okay, maybe you're a parent, maybe you're a grandparent. Ask, what are your children learning about in school? What are they hearing is the history of the country that you live in? Is it a balanced view? Where are the Indigenous people in this history? Where is the shared acknowledgement of maybe some of the historical mistakes we've made? And where is the opportunity to change? So start awareness, ask questions. Don't just accept and leave it to somebody else to figure it out. I think that taking personal responsibility for the collective is critical.
Roberta, when you think about your life, and I know your grandmother, proud grandmother, you were telling me that your granddaughter just won an award, or was being awarded for her film that she's made.
Working in film, yes.
Working in film, so it must be a proud moment. When you think back to either your 16-year-old self, or if you have words to your grandmother, to your granddaughter and her friends, what's the message about what it takes to lead a meaningful life, to be in service to others, once you discern from your instructions the gifts that you've been given and go forward to deploy them?
I'm going to draw on, when I was at Inspire, we asked students we supported. 90% of the students we supported financially graduated. We asked them what was one of the key success factors. And it is my own belief, but it's amazing what they said. Strong sense of identity. You have to know who you are. And that comes from inside. And listening to people around you. It comes from knowing your history. A strong sense of identity. You can do whatever, because you will then have courage. You will then have determination. You'll know your instructions. And I think also surround yourself with positive energy. I always say when I talk to young people, you know how many choices you make every day? I know when you're young, you think, oh, I can't make any choices. This is all just put upon me. I just do what I'm told and the world is mapped out. No, that's not true. You choose every day what you're going to wear, who you're going to sit with, what you're going to do on the weekend, where you're going to spend your time, who you're going to talk to, who you're not going to talk to. Many, 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 many choices are made every day. Own them. Own those choices. And surround yourself with people that make you feel good. Know what you have to do to feed your soul. Our people believe every day and start the day in gratitude.
Yes.
And nurture that throughout the day. Whatever you do. You don't have to be a famous anybody. You all have talents. Just nurture those talents, and that will bring you great joy. And I hope you'll put them to the use of your community and people around the world. I think that is one of the most fulfilling things. But it starts with know who you are. Take the time to know who you are first.
It's powerful. Thank you. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure just even getting to know you through this conversation. It's just remarkable. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you do, Reeta, every day.
Thank you.
Changing the world for the better. Thank you.
Roberta Jamieson's journey is a testament to a lifetime of breaking new ground, advocating for justice and equality, and transcending boundaries. Her legacy continues to inspire and lead with a vision for a more equitable and inclusive world. Thank you for joining us on Transcending Boundaries.